That was so good. Welcome back. It's been a while since I've done a review, so I've got a film for you. It's a documentary that I fell in love with when I very first saw it, and there's so much contained within it that usually I like to watch things twice in order to do a review of them, but this one definitely required it. And I was so worried about doing justice to the film that it kind of became a stumbling block. So the film in question is a documentary, and it's called The Destruction of Atlantis, and Jack Smith and the Destruction of Atlantis. This came out in 2007. It was directed by a woman named Mary Jordan, who was known for documentaries up until now, short ones, and this was her first feature-length one. And man, she picked a topic. Like, you couldn't get better. Now, my path to finding this was kind of circuitous because Kathleen was gone for the weekend, and I was indulging in my love of old films, and of course I watched Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And then I was looking on YouTube to see if anybody had done great collections of camp films, yada yada yada. Instead, I found video essays on the idea of camp, all of them based off Sontag's Notes on Camp, and watching them, not a single one of these essays contained the holy trinity of camp, which would be Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, Mommy Dearest, and Showgirls. None of those appeared in any of these films. When they were talking about camp, the one film they all went back to was the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I was kind of like, so I pulled up Sontag's Notes on Camp, read it, and it kind of, I've read it before, but it was really glaring this time. It very much reinforces that old joke that academics like to see if they can put into theory what they've already seen happening in practice. And then I remembered Jack Smith's wonderful essay, more of an aesthetic manifesto, that's called The Perfect Filmmakers of Maria Montez. Now, if you don't know who Maria Montez was, she was an actress from the DR, and she did these roles that you kind of have to see them in order to believe them. At one time, she was called the Queen of Technicolor. She made more money for Universal in that time period than any other actress. And she's kind of been widely denigrated for her performances, but at the same time, Jean Cocteau wanted to write a film for her and her husband, and she had all these other things going on that you're like, yeah, perceived wisdom is rarely well informed. You know, there's something missing in general consensus and discussions. So I would highly recommend you track down Sirens of Atlantis and Cobra Women, which are the two main Maria Montez films. There's a ton of other ones. They're all wonderful. And I'll link to a PDF copy of Jack Smith's essay. But The Destruction of Atlantis, Jack Smith and the Destruction of Atlantis. Sorry, I'm stumbling over the words here. What it talks about is Jack Smith was born in 1932 in Columbus, Ohio. In the early 50s, he moves to New York City, and he opens a photography studio. Well, at the time, most photographers were trying to do very realistic, static, head-on black and white images, and Jack Smith, he would take those portrait shots, but then he'd try to lure people into his back room, where he had all these amazing clothing and props, and he would set them up, try to entice them into doing photographs that recreated these Technicolor worlds that he had seen in the movie theater as a child. And at the time, his business card said everything ranging from the ancient Egypt to 1940s. That was his stock and trade, and other photographers of the time talk about meeting him, and he would tell them that he did experimental color, because at the time, color film was considered the province of amateurs, and professionals used black and white. And Jack Smith he did his own thing. If I've not mentioned this before, one of my favorite ideas is the unrepentant. Those people who are just going to do their thing no matter what, and screw the world. And Jack Smith embodies this ideal. One of the things that's so amazing about what Mary Jordan has done with this film is she's shown the wide-ranging influence that Jack Smith had. I mean, for a filmmaker that hardly anybody knows about, I mean, the talking heads in this film include John Zorn, Nick Zedd, Gary Indiana, Mario Montez, we'll get to that in a bit, Judith Malina, John Waters, George Kuchar, Tony Conrad, Holly Woodlawn, Ira Cohen, Billy Name, Robert Wilson, Ronald Tavel, Mary Woronov. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Like, that doesn't even begin to cover it. I mean, how she found this many people is, I don't know, it's amazing. And Ken Jacobs, the famous experimental film director, he states early on that Jack Smith was an artist dealing with the vagaries of life. And Jack Smith's assistant talks about they would be walking down the street in New York. Jack would see a pile of garbage, and he would go over and rearrange the garbage in order to make it more artistic and more in keeping with what he thought the city should be like. And it's such a beautiful idea because Jack Smith was poor throughout his entire life, but he did not let that stop him at all. And other filmmakers and playwrights in here talk about how you used to go to any large department store and go to the garbage can and pull out mannequins and bolts of cloth. And so that's what they would do. They would just pillage through the garbage cans to find the materials that they used to make their art. Immediately I thought of Ramal Z when that happened. There's always been these people that do it. And Jack Smith even said that trash is the material of creatives, and it exists whether you approve of it or not. And it's a beautiful idea. So Jack Smith in 1963 films what he's most famous for, Flaming Creatures, shot in black and white, and gets shown in New York. And after a couple of showings, it gets banned. I'll link to where you can see it on the Internet Archive, and you'll quickly figure out why in 1963 this film got banned, because there's dicks in it, you know. We like to think of the 60s as like woo-woo flower power, but when you think that came at the end of the 60s, early 60s were a much different deal. And here you have this very out gay filmmaker who's showing limp dicks on the screen. Of course, it was going to get in trouble. Now, this is where Jack Smith gets into one of his most memorable fights with Jonas Mecca. Because Jonas Mecca took this controversy and ran with it. Took the film, showed it all over the country. It's a famous banned film, which gives self-aggrandizing speeches before the performance and almost goad the police into arresting him, so it would cause it to blow up and become even bigger thing and, you know, promote underground film. And it's not just Jack Smith saying this, there's other people throughout the film, if you watch it, that talk about how Marquez was famous for taking these films, making as much money as possible out of them, and then giving as little money as possible back to the actual filmmakers themselves. So, either way, it is what it is, and I'm just stating what's in the film. And it's kind of nice that this film is very good at showing both sides of an argument without tearing down its subject nor unnecessarily building up. So, it's wonderful for that. And I'm going to have it running along the bottom because I really want you to get an idea of how beautiful this film is, because they did a very good job of representing Jack Smith's ideas through the very format itself. The editor of this film, Alex Marquez, sorry if I mispronounced that, he is one of the other strong points of this film, because the title designs and the graphics, it's Jack Smith referred to his own work as Baroque art, and that's the best way to describe what's going on. But returning to where we were, sorry, I digress there. When Jack Smith saw what happened with Flaming Creatures, he vowed from then on nobody else would ever be able to take his films and make money out of them, suck the travel out of them, do what they had done with Flaming Creatures. So he never finished another film, because as long as it wasn't finished, he had to be there to show the film to anybody interested. And he was constantly changing the film. He would be re-editing it as it was showing. He would play the records as they were showing. He just had total control this way. No one else could take it away from him. So he worked on another film called Normal Love, and I found a copy of that on YouTube. I'll link to that where you can see it. And a lot of his actors that worked in it, first of all, say they weren't acting. They would get into costumes and do what they were going to do. And Jack Smith would frame everything, and that's what was being shown on screen. And they also make the point that Jack Smith was showing reality. Not the dirty, dingy reality that we're forced into by landlords, and this is directly from Jack Smith, but the true reality that we inhabit. And that's what he was attempting to put on film through his use of non-actors, any materials that he could get his hands on, and he was creating his own reality. Jack Smith also did 2 years of plays in his loft, and people often remarked upon the play was supposed to start at midnight, and it might not get going till 2 or 3 in the morning. And they'd be like, "Look, Jack, people are leaving." He goes, "Those are the people I don't want here. The people I want here will stay to see art." And that's what comes to this documentary. Jack Smith believed in art wholeheartedly. He believed in art wholeheartedly, and he hated capitalist society just as vehemently. He often said that making art and making money are two diametrically opposed aims, and he had a whole personal symbology that he used, especially after his interactions with Marquez, with what he called the lobster, because he took the idea of Atlantis from the Maria Montez film is to mean the imagination. And one of his actors remarks upon the fact that to Jack Smith, he wanted to film the human imagination. So the more that someone's imagination could come through in their performance, the better a model they were to him. At the same time, Jack Smith hated what he called the rented world and landlords, because he said this is what kept people from living art every day in their life. So he would talk about this constantly. So he came up with Atlantis to mean the imagination, and the lobster was those people and institutions that do nothing but take and give nothing back in return. So these motifs and themes would appear constantly over and over in his work. And he even said in his last film that was not made, "No President, that anarchy is the giving part of politics." Like, he truly believed in this, and he would protest museums saying that they should be free, open to the public at all hours. Cities should be turned into large open-air art projects. I mean, it was incredible. And it's very interesting if you read reviews of this documentary to see people's responses, because they're all almost what he would call the products of a capitalist society, where they go after Jack Smith for never finishing works and not allowing a product to be completed that could be sold. Andy Warhol took a lot of his stuff from Jack Smith. Jack Smith actually appears in a few Warhol films, most notably Camp, and you can see him immediately taking over the entire scene. You have all of Warhol's entourage trying to act outlandishly and steal attention from the camera, and Jack Smith, just by being Jack Smith, he takes all the attention. Like, he just takes over entirely. I know I'm rambling at this point, but it's such an amazing piece of work, and he's such an amazing person that I really enjoyed it. Even more so the second time that I watched this documentary. I'll link below where you can buy the DVD. I would definitely do so, because not only is this a criminally underappreciated artist, but it's an amazing thing to think that he's out there saying this stuff through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, living his life directly on his own terms, and we still have people that are going, well, you didn't make product. And it just, I don't know, it's kind of mind-blowing that people cannot conceive. Like, Mark Fisher would have loved this. Anyways, yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for putting up with my rambling, and you probably heard Sybil bouncing around back there. It's spring. He's into it. Anyways, love you guys. Take care. Talk to you later.